I'm your host, Kat Filer. I'm also KJ Filer, author of Shadowrunner. And our guest today is a crime thriller novelist, Joseph Lewis, also a friend of mine. He has won a number of awards, just to name a few: Editor's Choice by Best Thrillers, Reader's Favorite Recommended Read. He was a Maxy Award runner-up for crime fiction, Literary Titan Silver Book Award, Pencraft Literary Award, among others. And his weekly blog, Simple Thoughts from a Complicated Mind, sort of, is something that I definitely follow all the time.
Well,
It's
thank
so
you.
good to have you, Joseph. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I just got finished with, and I know this isn't your first book, but Fan Mail. I just finished that, and I have a really nice review coming for that. Oh gosh, that was a good book.
Oh,
So
thank you.
for the audience, let me read the blurb for that. A barrage of threatening letters, a car bomb, and a heart attack rip apart what was once a close-knit family of adopted brothers, Randy and Bobby, along with a fellow band member and best friend, Danny. They receive fan mail that turns menacing. They ignore it, but to their detriment. The sender turns up the heat. Violence upends their world. It rocks the relationship between the boys and ripples through the family, nearly killing their dad. It's quite a book.
Oh, thank you, Kat. I tell you, this one was really special to me, and I really don't know how I got onto it. I really don't. I talked about in my previous book to this one, in Blaze In, Blaze Out, at the very end, I talked about fan mail and how the boys just seemed to ignore it because it seemed to be negative, and they were getting other letters that were very positive. So, being human nature and being kids, they just kind of ignore it. Well, the writer didn't like that, and that's really what came about in fan mail. And I think that the what sets me apart from many thriller crime people is that, along with the thriller and the crime aspect of my writing and the suspense, I have a strong coming of age theme
Yes.
that is in my book. And this book, Fan Mail, is told through Brian's eyes, for the most part, and it's his acceptance of himself, the family's acceptance of him. He's one of seven, what I call a patchwork family of adopted kids, um, and it's they're all have baggage, like most kids do, and they're dealing with it as best they can with the different situations and circumstances that I throw at them.
I liked your redefinition of family, and I love the theme of acceptance. Uh, Brian is accepting himself, the boys and the father are accepting him, but they're also working with, as you said, past family relationships,
Mhm.
working through that. And so that was really interesting. So this whole crime thing runs through this, but then there's also all the relationships, and I love a good character-driven book.
Oh, me too. To me, a story, any good book, any good story starts first with character,
I think so.
and it's how the character responds, how the character acts and reacts, and I think that makes the story.
Yeah. I think one of the things that drew me in from the beginning was I cared about what was happening to these boys. I really cared about the dad. I love Brian. He's the glue for the whole
Yes.
thing, and I loved how he's on the one side sort of the outcast, and on the other side he's the person everyone needs.
Hmm.
So I really liked that. There was an awful lot about this book that. What started you writing this one besides the other book?
Um, it just, I wanted to deal with, I've been fascinated. There are certain, I've been around kids for what, 47 years as a teacher, coach, counselor, administrator, and I seem to know them. I gravitate towards them. I used to hang in the hallways and the cafeterias and just listen to kids talk, watch them interact, and things like that. And for a long time, I've wondered about kid actors and kid singers,
Okay.
and how they navigate the world that's kind of they're thrust in.
Hmm.
The Sprouse twins, they're Cole and whatever his name is. I lost it. But they surprise me in that they never, to my knowledge, and never to the people who write about them, have experimented with drugs, have done super much with alcohol at a young age. They kind of navigated that world and are now very successful. You know, Cole is an actor, and the other guy is an entrepreneur. He has his own brewery and his own um, business that he's working with. But then you have other characters, other actors that just fall by the wayside, and the world kind of spit them up and chewed them out, you know, all that
Mhm.
good stuff. And I just kind of wondered how that happened. And so that's really, I think, how I stumbled on fan mail and how fan mail is going to affect this country rock band that seems to be getting notice, and how they're going to work with each other.
Yeah, and I know, and the resolution in this book is perfectly satisfactory. The thing is, though, I can see that it heads into the next book.
Yes.
So that's really good, and I'm wanting to read the next one because I want to find out what more. You haven't left us hanging, but I'm thinking to myself, I can imagine what more. There's more to this.
Yes, there is. I'm about 51,000 words into the next one. It's Navajo term called Black Yi, which is, it translates to the evil one. And that's the title of the book, Black Yi, and in parentheses, the evil one. And it talks a little bit about George, about Brian, Brett, certainly. And it's kind of a sequel to an earlier book I wrote called Cotton Web. At the end of that book, the main characters, George, Bobby, a mother and a son, and two cops, made a pact and a promise to try to keep the kids' names and the family's name out of the the death that occurred in this house. And it was there to their advantage to keep this secret because the MS-13 is a very nasty gang,
Mm.
and they want revenge. They will seek revenge, and mostly just to thwart their power or push their power onto other people. They're scare tactics. And if the secret's broken, then everybody's in peril. And somebody broke the secret, and that's what this book is about. Um,
So I noticed, at least in fan mail, that it is a crime thriller, but it's definitely appropriate for young adult reading also.
yes, I this when I go to book signings and fairs, I not only have parents reading it, but I have kids as young as middle school on up reading it, and they're just glomming onto it. And one kid begged his parent because a friend of his was reading it and was talking about it, and so dad relented, and the kid bought the book and just he started reading it as they were walking away, which I thought was pretty cool.
That's great. And I think that that is such an underrated genre. You put that on your book and it almost keeps people from buying it. But on
Yeah,
the other hand, you kind of have to alert people that it could be okay for these readers. I'm having that problem with Shadowrunner. It is definitively young adult, and yet my readers are mostly women between the ages of 16 and 80, and I don't know. There's no category for that.
no, and it's interesting how the different fan base,
Yeah.
they read your books and you kind of scratch your head and go, "Oh, how did that happen?"
Yeah, for sure. I've been very surprised that I have any male readers at all because it's a strong female character. But in your book, I can see young people of both genders or anything in between reading this book and finding something in it for them.
I
Uh,
agree.
yeah, and I think that Brian's story in particular is going to hit notes with an awful lot of people, well, adults too. And there are going to be
Yes.
people that are going to read this and see their kids
Yes.
and see what's going on and maybe a little insight there. So
You
that's
know, and when I know that this happens with you, you have an idea about what you're writing about, but you don't really think about a theme
right.
in your book. That comes after everything is written and all the edits and all that other stuff. And people point out, well, this is what I got from it. And I'm thinking, wow, that was a pretty strong theme. And so theme to me comes after everything is done. And when you do the rereading, it's kind of an aha moment that I didn't realize I was writing about this.
Did you have beta readers?
Yes, I do. And it's, to me, that's important because
Yeah.
they kind of guide me. There's a lady, Teresa Stork, that has been with me from, oh, way back. She was a teacher of mine and just a brilliant lady. And she and another person, Sharon King, who's my nurse in fan mail. All my medical stuff really comes from her and a doctor friend of mine. And they they are my beta readers, and they'll point out, you missed this. I think you can go stronger here. Pull back on that. And beta readers are so important, I think, for any author.
Yeah, they really are. And I have found that I get different things from different types of beta readers. So,
Yes.
for example, author friends are very good in terms of this is saleable, that's not.
Yes.
But sometimes they get a little mixed up about their role, and not everyone, but there's been a couple times where somebody means well and they're trying to tell me where the book ought to go, and they forgot that it's, I forgot too. It
Yeah.
actually held me up for a couple of years. And then, but then people who beta read and stay with you, I've been a beta reader for years for a number of authors. And for me, it's just a chance to get a free book from somebody
Yeah.
that you love,
Yes.
So, and those to me are invaluable because they're reading as just a reader. These are the people that are going to put a review up for you on Amazon or buy your book.
Mm-hmm.
So those,
Tino Haley is a beta reader. She's an author, fantasy, and she wrote a kind of a dark thriller called Dark Drink. And I read for her and wrote a review. And Tina said she was going to skim it because she really didn't have time. She was finishing up her semester. She was going to skim it and read the synopsis, and she said she got caught and she had to read it. And she's her first words after that, she told me that was, "Oh my God, Joe." And
yeah.
and I thought, I think I did a good one.
Let me just say you did it again because
Oh,
I bought your book with all the same intentions. I thought, well, I really like Joe, and that looks interesting, and it'll be I'll just read it and leave a nice review, and that's why I bought it and totally got sucked in. Just
thank you.
there were so many things. I was in the middle of a book launch. I had no time to read, and so I'm at late at night. I'm sitting in bed reading, and Rick says, "You need to go to bed." And I said, "I know, but I have to know what happens."
See,
Yeah.
from way back when I wrote Stolen Lives, which is the first book of the Lives trilogy, that series was based upon my work. I volunteered for the Wetterling Foundation,
Okay.
Ranger Abducted and Sexually Exploited Kids.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I wanted to give back to that community. I wanted to tell the kids' story, but I didn't want to do it about young girls being taken because that's been done and done and done. So I did it about boys being taken and used because it's an untalked about
Yeah.
subject. It's almost taboo. We don't do that, but I thought it was important because that's really kind of who I work with. I work with parents keeping their kids safe. I talk to kids keeping themselves safe, and then to caregivers, what signs to look for and things like that. And I always wanted to tell their story, so that's what I did. And kind of like James Patterson, he writes very short chapters,
Yep.
very succinct, and he keeps the reader going. And
Yep.
one reader, it was a teacher of mine. He stormed into my office. He goes, "Lewis, you gotta stop. I have to sleep at some point."
You end up okay. So your chapters are short, and that's sort of like you look at it from, well, I've got the time for this because you can, you're just going to read this many pages, and then you don't though because you get to the end, and then you leave us in a place where we're like, well, now what? Oh,
Yeah.
wait. Okay, one more, and one more, and the next thing you know, you've been up for 5 chapters, and you just have to say, okay, well, what time is it? Oh my, and move
Well,
on.
thank you.
I really do think that that the fact that it's a crime thriller is going to pull in the right readers, but also I really hope that people figure out that this is really appropriate for young adult readers, because I think that you didn't just write a story, you did a service. There were an awful lot of things. I happen to know some people in some circumstances in your book, And I was reading this and thinking, I think if the parents or the kids themselves had read a book like this, maybe things would have happened to work out better or faster, because you see the warning signs because you've seen it someplace before. And I know it's fiction, but just like you said, fiction is always based on fact. So yeah, I was very impressed with that. And it's certainly something I'll be recommending to young readers now.
Thank
So
you.
very excited about it. And I know that I have the books to go. I can go back in time and read your earlier books, but you need to keep going because you have to keep these people alive if you don't provide a world for them. And I'm very invested in their futures and their past, and I'm really looking forward to finding their pasts.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what advice do you have for aspiring authors?
Oh, I would say you have to read. I mean, if it to me, I was a coach for many years, at the high school and the college level. And to me, I compare it to being an athlete. If you're going to be a student athlete, you have to get in the weight room, you have to train, you have to make yourself better. And so to me, weight training is to athletics or to the student athlete as reading is to the writer, because without, Stephen King says, without the reading, you don't have the tools to write. And so I think that's really important. And you read in and out of your genre. Just
Yeah.
don't get stuck in one.
Yeah.
There was one person I did an interview with recently, and he was worried about stealing someone else's voice. And I don't know that that's possible because you have your own.
Right.
And it's important that you have to be able to read. The other thing is you don't take no for an answer. There's going to be an audience out there. There's going to be a person that's going to be interested. I can tell you that I could wallpaper a small room in my house with all the rejections that I've gotten, over the years. And I just listened to this agent that I was working with at the time. No, we're going to keep going, and you have to keep going. And so don't take no. There's going to be somebody willing to give you a shot.
Yep. I in a previous life was a publicist to authors, and one of my clients, she carried from when she did presentations, she carried a trash can, and it was completely covered in decoupaged in rejection letters from some of the big houses,
Wow.
inside and out. And it was such a good prop because she would sit there and talk to people who wanted to write, wanted to be an author, had a novel in them. And it's that rejection thing is very real. And she said, this is where they go, right here. And I just thought that was great. Not just in the trash can, they become part of the trash can because they're trash.
Sure.
Plus the other thing too, and I got this from her, and I have experienced it in my own life. Sometimes the rejection is an extremely valuable learning
Yes.
experience for you.
Yes.
I got some feedback, and if they bother to give you feedback, open that letter because somebody took the time
Yeah.
and they have something to say, because mostly it's radio silence.
Yeah.
So
Sometimes you don't hear anything at all
yeah.
from somebody that you send it to. Others, you get the form letter, and you could almost recite it by heart. And one is the same as the other. And then you get these others that were just really beautiful. And you say, wow, and you learn from it. And I think that's important. It's a valuable lesson.
Yep, I agree. So I know that you worked with the kids, and so probably Brian came out of that,
Yes.
but is there some sort of thing that you're trying to communicate to the world about just a more broad message in this book? Because I can see an awful lot of them, and I didn't know if they were intentional.
No, they really weren't.
Okay.
To be honest, they just happened. And like I said, a good story, I think, is so character dependent. And Brian is just a very rich character. And he is a kind of a composite of several kids that I've had in the counseling office or on my basketball team. And then they've stayed with me for so many years that I look back on them and they've become friends as adults, which is really kind of neat. But it's really their story told through Brian. And then a lot of it is my imagination as well.
But he's such a good character because he's a sort of fending off all of the blows. And at the very same time, he's got a shoulder for everyone.
Yeah, there's a passage. If you don't mind, I have a passage I'd like to
Absolutely,
read.
please.
It takes place very early. It's actually page 4, and it's an English classroom, and they're discussing Lord of the Flies. And Brian read the book in 3 days, and other people have read it in the year before. Other people are just learning about it, and they're having this discussion. And the teacher said, "Brian, you're pretty silent today. What are your thoughts?" He said, "It depends upon what you think strong means. Honestly, I don't think any of them are strong. Being strong means having integrity. Ralph didn't defend Piggy even when he was being picked on. If he had integrity, he would have defended Piggy no matter who was against him. Jack broke rules he felt weren't necessary, even though there needed to be order. A person with integrity doesn't break rules just because he might not like them. Piggy whined and complained, but he tried to establish order. I think because of his size and his whining, no one paid attention to him. A leader has to have followers." And then the teacher said, "Well, what is your definition of integrity?" And Brian didn't wait to be called upon. He said, "Someone who speaks the truth and lives it even when others don't. A person who is genuine." And then she said, "Well, that can make someone pretty unpopular, don't you think?" And he said, "Yes, it's what makes someone strong. Speaking the truth and following the rules, no matter who else does or doesn't. Being willing to take a stand, even if it's unpopular. Standing up for your beliefs. If you don't do those things, you don't have integrity and you aren't strong." And I think that defines Brian's character to a T.
I agree. I obviously, the other characters have depth too, but he had the most depth. And well, obviously he's kind of the focus anyway, but I was repeatedly impressed with, and I don't mean character in the term writing, but I mean in his character as a
Mhm.
person. Things would happen to him that really required some sort of response, but there wasn't anything to be done about it. So, moving on and then being a better person.
Yeah, he's able to kind of how to say, compartmentalize,
Yeah.
or put it in a box and kind of put it away, and let's deal with this because this has to be dealt with right now. That can wait. And he did that continually throughout the book.
Yeah. I have seen, I tell you that I didn't think that I was a fan of crime novels, but I've read yours and I've read Kathy Stager Nichols, and more because of being part of a community and then getting sucked in and saying, well, this isn't what I thought it was at all. So I'm really liking this. So now I'm starting to follow the genre. I think I even got sucked in a little bit with a author friend on horror, which I had a whole idea about what that was, and it isn't. So I'm hoping that people that are looking at this book, fan mail, are going to look at it from it's probably more involved and deeper in ways that I'm not expecting than you would think just looking at the cover or looking at the genre. And I don't know how you feel, but I'm finding people are having hard times putting their books in a category these days. It's like everyone is writing cross genre,
Yeah.
and I'm okay with that. People write a book like you said. It's a story. Where does it fit? I don't know. I mean, you have to figure out what shelf it goes on, or you can't find it. But these books, increasingly, I'm finding books can go on multiple shelves, and I don't know if it's always been that way, or if it's just that authors are starting to have a little more agency.
That and push they're pushing the limits and willing to push the limits. You look at, and I love music, and I've been involved with music all my life. You look at various artists who last forever,
Mhm.
and they're able to push the genre a little bit. Keith Urban was a rocker. He went, and some of this stuff is very country, and now it's really he's pushing country into rock and roll. And I think the successful people are able to cross genre and kind of push the boundaries. And I know publishers don't really care for that because they have to market the book, right? And I find it sometimes difficult because while this fan mail is a crime thriller, I mean,
Oh, yeah.
there's some very tough things going on with these kids. I think what's important is that, again, it's story, but I did cross the line in going into a pretty much of a coming of age story within.
You did. Um, but and I have always been a little bit confused about why publishers, and not everybody, not all the publishers, but especially the big houses, they seem to want to put you in a pigeonhole. Why? I mean, if they can sell it to a couple of different markets, that seems like a good strategy.
To me, that's wise, but I can't speak to the big houses.
No, and I haven't had any experience with the big houses, so I actually did work for a couple of authors that had contracts with big houses. However, as a publicist,
Sure.
however, they had a very narrow view, and they were constantly bumping up against their authors. And I think these days, with especially with the online community, not only are authors uh, having more agency, but they're more in touch with their fans.
Yes.
And I think that gives them a little bit more power. And one of the things I wanted to do with this program was put the fans in touch with the author. Even if you just can't call them up, but at least have heard from them, know what they look like. Although I
Sure.
have to tell you that I'm a little bit of an introvert. You wouldn't think so, but I am. And I hate being recognized. So,
People think of me as an extrovert, but I, I'm not really. It's a stretch for me to be that way. But I think with Facebook, with Instagram, with LinkedIn, with Twitter,
yeah.
I think there's access to people,
Mhm.
and people are aware because of that. And it's really neat when you get a message from somebody saying, "Hey, I read this book. It's really cool. What did you mean by?" And I thought that that when that interaction happens, I think it becomes rich in that it becomes personal. I'm just not this person that people think of. He's out there and he's famous or not famous or whatever. It become a real person, and I think that's helpful. I think to any reader is that we are people, you and I, and the others that we know. We have families. We have experiences that we've dealt with in our families. Um, and I think sometimes that kind of oozes into the book in between in the binding. And I think if people see us as real people,
Yeah.
I think that helps sell books as well.
Well, that's another reason why I like the YA aspect of this, is because you are empowering young people in this book. And I think that's a really important thing. I don't know if you're familiar with Robert Gwaltney. He
Yes.
wrote a book, yeah, and he just had a thing up on online somewhere. I don't even know where I saw it, and it said, "Have you ever met a unicorn?" And he talks about having met an author in, I think, grade school, and it was that aha moment when you realize that there's a person behind
Yes.
the book. And I
Yeah.
think now, with us all being on social media and stuff, I try to keep my family out of it, but there's a little bit of that in there. And I'm sure, I've seen stuff with you too. Um, but I think that it's kind of nice. The readers are a little kinder too, because
Yes.
they look at you and it's like, well, he's a good guy. I mean, yes, and maybe understanding a little bit more about what the drive was behind this, or what the idea was behind it.
Mm. Yes, I agree.
So, yeah. So what do you want your readers to know about your other books? Because one thing I noticed is that your characters develop as the books go. I'm having to go back in time now so I can learn the things that I see, and I know that they came from another book.
You're the second person this week that said that very same thing. They started out kind of in the middle, and now they want to go back and they
Mhm.
want to follow. How did this person get here? Um, I think that's one thing the readers need to know is that I carry my characters forward, very much like James Patterson does with his Alex Cross character and his family. They're from book to book to book, and all they do is change the circumstances, situation that they happen to be in. So that's one thing people should know. The other thing is, in all of my books, there is a coming of age aspect to the writing, not just it's my books are more than bullets and car chases and things blowing up. And you can get that from other people. You get some of that with me, but you're going to get a character-driven story that characters first, and it's how they react and act that I think is really an essential ingredient in my writing.
I think, and I don't know if this is intentional, but you've also got a theme of chosen family.
Yes. Well, my wife and I adopted a little guy, William, from Guatemala. And I was going through it as a single guy before I met Kim.
Okay.
And Guatemala is inexpensive. It was favorable to single people. And so when Kim and I started dating, and then when we got married, I was about here in terms of the adoption paperwork, and she was down here in terms of
Okay.
the adoption. So what we decided to do is continue. And he was supposed to be in time for our wedding, and he wasn't. Our government and Guatemalan government threw up some roadblocks here and there. So we got pregnant with Hannah and gave birth on November 11th. December 12th, 1 month and 1 day later, I'm on the plane to go get Will in Guatemala. And so our family was blended at the very start. We were 2 kids, neither speaking English. We were English, Spanish, and charades, a whole lot of charades for about the first 6, 7, 8, 9 months. And then there was some tragedy in that. In 2014, my son Will was shot and killed in Chicago. And he was walking down a street. One gang saw a different gang member. It was kind of retaliatory. Will was caught in the middle. He was collateral damage, and he died on the street. And so in my writing, not only is the blended family prominent, but also there have been themes of death and loss in each of my books that I deal with, I think, through my writing. And I think evidently other people are also able to deal with it as they read it. It touches a chord, I think. Loss can mean many different things to many different people. And I think that human aspect of loss, I think, unites many people, much like love does.
And I'm sorry for your loss. I can see where, and I don't know him personally, but I can see where he probably lives on in your work, or at least in spirit. There's an awful lot of discussion in this book about life, just sort of life happens. And then you go on and you try to make things better. And the other message that I sort of got from this, so I was asking if you had particular things in mind, but was that when things are really good, that's great. There's a little bumpy road coming ahead, though. Like, it's going to get bumpy again.
Sure.
And all through your book, your characters just adapted to that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think kids are actually able to navigate waves better than adults can sometimes.
I think so.
Life in general is one wave after another. There's the crest and then there's the trough. And we deal with it. And you have to, because the waves just keep on coming. And that's the way life is. And I think kids adapt sometimes better than adults do. It becomes no big deal. One of my favorite commercials is they talk about what makes you different. And it's 2 kids and one kid, well, she likes lettuce and I didn't like lettuce, but I used to like lettuce. And the kid is black and the girl is white. And they're both different gender. Yeah. And there's several different vignettes about that. And I thought, that's kids. Yeah. They don't care as much as adults do.
No. Or they care about different things and don't see the things that we think everyone sees. I think that's really good. And I also like the fact that Danny is not family, but you would think so.
Yes. Yeah, he's kind of like everybody's little brother. I think I mentioned that in the book. He lives about 200 yards away. His dad is a famous writer. He's a horror thriller writer. And Danny is just this very bright, very gifted kid with an eidetic memory. And he is this musical savant. and he's the guy who started the band, and he is in and out of all my books. He's, like I said, he's everybody's little brother, and everybody kind of gloms onto him as a buddy and as a little brother would.
Hmm. Yeah. The relationship between the boys is so precious, especially at the beginning of your book where there's a potential tragedy happening and the boys all have to get together, inform each other, be there for each other, decide what they're going to do about this. I don't want to spoil the book, so I won't say what happens, but the idea is that the very first thing you see are the relationships.
Yes, and that was intentional.
Yeah.
That had to come first, and it had to be front and center. And I purposely withheld information from the reader at the very start. You had to get into the book, the first several chapters, in order to figure out, oh, this is what's happening, and this is why it's happening. And that was intentional.
Yeah, I wondered about that. I mean, and I saw what you're talking about, and again, I don't want to ruin it for the reader, but what I can tell anybody considering picking up this book is that it's way more than you would think. Just if you were to look at the blurb and you were to look at the genre and whatever the publisher says about it, it's way bigger than that. There's a
I
reason.
had one reviewer. I
Yeah,
had one reviewer actually write that. What she said is,
really.
yes, one reviewer said, this is a thriller, but to call it a thriller, it
Right.
is doing it an injustice because it's way more than that.
Yeah.
And I think that can be described. That describes all 9 of my books.
Yeah. And I'm going to find out. I'm going to have to work through those now. But no, because I picked it up, and not kidding. I picked it up because it was you and
Thank
because
you.
it looked interesting. And then I got pulled in because it was so much more than that.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, it's definitely going to be on my top. And by the way, and we talked about this a little bit, to other people listening and to authors even, books are the best gift ever.
Yes.
So when you read a book, and I also believe in books taking on their own life. If an author signs a book, it's not leaving my house. Okay. But if I have a copy of a book and somebody probably would like that book, I'll hand it to them and say, just return it in good condition so we can, or pass it on to someone else. And I just make them, prove that they passed it on. And so I believe in sharing books, and I believe in gifting books. I think it's one of my favorite things to give people for their birthdays. And also, so with the digital age, you don't even have to package or eat or mail it. You just
Yeah. Yeah. I had a reader. I had a book sale signing. She said, I think I'm going to read this first, and then I'm going to give it for Christmas.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
It
Yep.
works.
When my own book launched, there had been some beta readers who purchased the e-version so that it could be verified purchase
Yeah.
when they did the review, which I thought was really nice. And
Mhm.
then I had a whole bunch of people sending me books for signature that they bought the physical one too. And I'm saying, I would have done that.
Exactly.
You already bought the book, but they, and I think authors are a little bit like that anyway. I don't know how you are, but if my house is on fire, the thing I'm going to throw in a box and take with me right away is going to be my signed books. Everything else is on digital.
I agree. I had one guy he bought my whole catalog, all 9 books, and he had me write the inscription to his son, and it's going to be a gift to his son when he graduates from college. He's going to get all these books.
Yeah,
What a neat gift.
it is. Both of my kids collected signed books when they were kids because I was doing publicity for authors. And so they would go to events with me sometimes and hang out. And that was really kind of cool for the kids too, because they grew up with authors. I remember listening to, I don't know if you know who he is, a musician, Chuck Mangione.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I would listen to him in an interview one time, and he was talking about all the people that hung out at his house when he was growing up. And it wasn't until he became a musician himself and was trying to get into the industry that he thought, holy, do you know who used to come on Sunday for dinner?
Yeah.
My kids have grown up that way too. And not that necessarily everyone is a big name, but just the fact that it is a person who wrote a book. People
Yes.
That's magic to kids.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And if you want to get kids writing, have an author as a guest.
Yes, I agree.
And we,
I spoke recently at a creative writing. It was a creative writing class, and the teacher wanted me to speak to not only my books but the process of and how does one go about it. And the kids asked the best questions.
they do.
It was just marvelous, the interaction between the kids and myself. It was awesome. It was one of the best things I've ever done.
I think that I'm starting to get a little bit of that right now where the mother has bought the book and she's let one of the kids read it. And now I'm hearing from the kids what the kids say are, man, you wish you knew that before you had it in print, you know? So sometimes I'm thinking, oh, there was a missed opportunity. Well, for next time, I'll take that down.
Sure.
And yeah, my advice to aspiring readers is a little bit, people think it's strange, but it's not. I met a long time ago an author by the name of Dory Sanders, and people in Georgia have no idea that she and her family, they run a peach stand. They have orchards and stuff, and they have a business. They run a peach stand. She sits at the stand and sells peaches. Nobody has any idea who she is. She's had her book made for TV. I mean, she's a
Wow.
big deal. And she sits there, and I was talking to her and I said, "Don't you love not being recognized?" And she says, "I really do." And she says, "I had a small problem because one of my little props, things that I do when I'm writing a book is I write down when people say something that I like, a turn of a phrase or a word I hadn't
Yes.
used before." And she says, "But I was writing in a notebook and people were getting suspicious. What are you doing?" And so she said, "I was starting to write on the sides of peach crates, and then I had to bring them home and transcribe them." So, so my advice to aspiring young authors is there is a record feature on your phone,
Yes.
and I use that. I don't record other people. That's not fair, but I do. I get around the corner and I repeat what somebody said.
Yes.
So I have it captured and then later. And it's the same sort of thing as reading. You're reading and you think, what a fantastic way to describe that.
Yes.
You know, it's not just you can picture it in your mind.
Yes. Absolutely. That's the writer I talked about earlier, Joan Livingston. She writes in such a picturesque way. See, when I write, I I kind of write it as I see it in my head. It's kind of like a movie version. You
Mhm.
know, they're standing here, they're talking here, there's this gesture and things like that. That's Joan Livingston. And the way she writes, the phrases that she uses is just, it is so picturesque. I don't have the adjectives to describe it. You just have to pick up one of her books. And I have on my phone, I have a notes section. I
Oh,
have a file called Notes, and that thing is full. And I use it, or I might twist it. But boy, some of these people that are right are just, they're awesome.
they are. And the economy of words is something that I really like. You're very good at that. Saying a
Thank
lot
you.
in a short number of words, that it's a very powerful sentence.
Thank
Uh,
you.
It really hit me a couple places, and I wish that I had written them down to quote, but where I read it and then I stopped, and not because I popped out of the story. I stopped because I thought, that was so well said. And I would go back and I read it again and read it again and then moved on, but made a note. I love that when the author makes it so that you can highlight or tag the pages or whatever, so you can go back
Mhm.
and look at that again.
You know, that is the one of the highest compliments I think I've ever gotten. Thank you, Kat. I
Oh,
really appreciate that. Thank you.
it was definitely earned. Well, I have really enjoyed talking to you. Is there anything I missed?
I don't think so. I think we covered a lot. Thank you so
Okay.
much for having me. And I think the reader, the people that listen, thanks for your attention. And I hope that you got something out of this.
I'm sure that they did. Um, so I will let you know when this posts, but it's going to be pretty quickly. And I just really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you, Kat. It was nice seeing a person behind the name. That's nice.
Thanks.